Fun sound that made. That was kind of cool. Hi, everybody out there in YouTube land. Welcome back to Mr. Lavick's classroom. We're going to have a period 2 today. Period 2. The time is 8:51 a.m. I hope everybody's having a good day. I should turn around this computer so you can hear me a little bit better. Hope that's better for you all. We're all having a good Wednesday morning. It's Wednesday. You know what that means? Tomorrow's Thursday. Tomorrow's Thursday, which I like to call Friday Eve. Anybody doing anything fun tonight?
Absolutely not.
Who's watching The Bachelor tonight? Not me. Hey, who's going to the dance this weekend? It's this weekend, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's nice. I'm nice to you guys. Like I'm giving you guys conversation starters. Like when you're out there on the dance floor and you're like dancing awkwardly with your date and you don't know what to talk about.
And you're sweating.
You can be like, hey, how about factory? It's kind of cool how you can, take out the GCF. What's ever in common in the two factors? Hey, come on now. You know what's funny? I have a picture on my desk. This is my wife and I at my, I think, junior year. This is my junior year winter promo. I'm sorry just to be loud. I'm too loud. This is my junior year winter promo. It's me and my wife. What did you say? What's a TikTok? Like a clock?
We just take the rest of the class.
I know what a TikTok is. Okay, now that we've got sufficiently off topic. Great. So glad we recorded this. So again, we have a quiz tomorrow over just identifying prime factorization, identifying what a GCF is, and then factoring out a GCF. Okay? So what we did yesterday is we got ready to do what we're doing today. Right? We just talked about in our homework from last night that there were problems where, a binomial could be our GCF. It's not just a number, it's not just in the letters, it's not just a combination of numbers and letters. The whole binomial could be our GCF. So, for example, everybody take a look at this problem. How many terms does this problem have? 4 terms. We would consider this a quartic polynomial. Quartic 4-term polynomial. Quartic because it's to the 4th power. But this is a 4-term polynomial. Whenever you have 4 terms, here's what you do. Everybody do this with me. Underline the first 2 terms and underline the last 2 terms. Now, here's the method that we're going to do. Let's factor out a GCF of both sets. Here's what I mean. Take a look here. Within just my first 2 terms, what's my GCF? Just between my first 2 terms, what's my GCF? 2h to the 3rd. Yeah, let's stop just saying the number, and let's move on and say number and letter, number and variable. 2h to the 3rd. That's my GCF of my first 2 terms. What do we do with the GCF? We take it outside of parentheses. Now, I'm going to stop doing the step where I write it underneath. Okay, what happened? What's left over after I remove 2h to the 3rd? What's left over? Noah? 3h minus 2, right? Everybody follow me there? That's just within my first grouping. This is called factor by grouping. We group the first two terms and we group the second two terms. And then we remove GCFs. Now, what's my GCF of my second two terms? 5. That one's a little bit easier to spot, isn't it? And is that a positive 5 or a negative 5? It's a positive because I lead with a positive, right? So I'm going to write a plus 5. Now, what's left over after I remove that plus 5? What's left over? 3H, what? OMG. Look at your parentheses. So they're the same thing. So this is just like the problems we did yesterday. Take a look at my two groups now. What's the GCF of my two groups? 3H minus 2. So what do we do with the GCF? We remove it, we put it on the outside, and then we just say what's left over. What's left over? 2H to the third plus 5. And that's my answer. This method is called factor by grouping. It's the only way, yes, the only way is like all the way up through Algebra 2. You don't learn another method until like half the way through the year for Algebra 2 to factor down a 4-term polynomial. Okay? This is the only way to do that. Just factor by grouping. Okay, let's do another one. So again, we're going to do this process again. Underline the first two terms, underline the last two terms. Factor by grouping. Okay, so what is my GCF of my first two terms? 2b to the second. Again, let's keep saying the letter, the variable, along with it. What's left over after I remove the 2b to the second power? What's left over? 3b plus 4. What's my GCF out of my second set? Just 3. And it's a positive 3, right? So we write a plus 3. What's left over after we remove the 3? And look at that. Look at my two sets of parentheses. So my GCF between those two big sets is 3b plus 4. 3b plus 4 goes on the outside. What the what? Where did a 4 become an H? What? Here we go. Yeah, here we go. Hold on. Yeah, I'm sorry, folks. It's Monday. Whoa, that's really weird. Like, look at this. This is like. 2b squared plus 3. Oh. There we go.
Okay today?
Whoa, something is wrong with me today.
Something's wrong with me every day.
I should just scrap this video. Never mind, just deleting the video. All right, take a look at this one. Again, underline the first two, underline the last two. You can only do this factoring by grouping method with a 4-term polynomial. That's why we spent so long and talking about, okay, how to identify how many terms it has. Because the method in which you factor always determines which is always determined by how many terms you have. Okay, what's my GCF of my first two terms? 4R. What's left over after we remove the 4r? R squared plus 6. Okay, what's my GCF of my second two terms? 1. Don't say there is none. Because remember, we talked about this. There is always a GCF. It may just be 1, but there's always a GCF. So what do we write? Well, plus 1. And then what goes in on the inside? Well, it doesn't change anything, but we didn't want it to change because now we see that the r squared plus 1, or sorry, r squared plus 6 is my big GCF. So r squared plus 6 goes on the outside. What's left over? 4r plus 1. Now, how would I check my answer if I really wanted to? I would multiply it back together. What method would we use to multiply these two things? The FOIL method, right? I would use the FOIL method. So if you really wanted to, you could check your answer here. My firsts would be 4r to the third. My outers would be plus r squared. My inners would be 24r. My last would be plus 6. That would get me back to where I started. Okay, let's try this one. Now, the first thing that I might say about this one is that, is it in standard form? I think, yeah, the last one was not in standard form, but.
Last one wasn't.
It still worked out anyway. Let's put this one into standard form first. 2x to the third minus 12x squared. What should come next? Then what? Okay, so now let's say factor by grouping. The reason I put this one in standard form is because it causes a weird problem that we can solve. What's my GCF of my first two terms? Two x to the second. Remember, I always go with the smaller power. And then so we have x minus 6 left over, right? Okay, what's my GCF of my second two terms? -3. Good. I'm glad some people caught that. Aren't I leading my second two terms with a negative number? So then my GCF is a -3. Okay, what does that mean? Well, if you need to, just do this again. That leaves me with a positive x inside and a -6. Oh, so if we didn't pull out that negative, it would have left a positive inside there. So I'm glad we pulled out the negative because now we see they both have an x minus 6 in common. So I have an x minus 6 as my GCF. Leftovers are the 2x squared minus 3. Okay, let's take a look. Why don't you guys try the next one? It's not in standard form. Watch out.
I think standard form too.
Yeah. That's what I did.
What's my GCF of my first two terms? -5x to the second. Second two terms is quattro. Oops. How do we do on that one? So that's pretty much as hard as I could get with a factoring by grouping problem. Now, here's the deal. Guess not every 4-term polynomial will be able to factor by grouping. So what would happen? Well, if you pulled out the GCFs and the parentheses are not the same, what would you say? Prime. Okay? If you factored out GCFs and you got like a 2x plus 1 and a 3x minus 4, they're not the same, so you would say prime on that, or not factorable. Okay? All right, last question that we got, little word problem here. A rocket is fired vertically into the air at 40 meters per second. The expression -5t squared plus 40t plus 20 gives the rocket's height after t seconds. You'll notice that these things called quadratics are going to come up a lot pretty soon here, especially in problems or sections 8.3 and 8.4. But what's cool about quadratics is that they always model what's called projectile motion. So like if I throw anything, it's modeled by that like parabola that we talked about before. And what we'll do to figure out like time in the air is we'll actually like factor them down. It's interesting. But right now, all I'm asking you to do is factor this expression. Now, how many terms do I see? Can I factor by grouping? No, because it's only 3 terms. So the only other way that I know how to factor this is just by taking its GCF out. So what is its GCF? -5. Thank you. -5. -5. So when we remove the -5, it becomes positive t squared minus what? 8t minus 4. Hey, I'm second guessing myself today. I just wrote a 4 as an H. I need to rethink my life right now. I need to rethink everything that I'm thinking. 4s have turned into H's, have turned into, I don't know. All right, I hope this has been an entertaining YouTube video. Hey, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Go to my store and buy some merch. Yeah, I've got a merch store.
We can actually make one.
You can get like pop sockets for your calculator with my face on them. Just kidding. Just